Hi everyone, in this video I wanted to cover general trends for the 2022. I'm going to have a separate video posted where I go through each month individually and highlight the individual important days for each month. But I wanted to also make a separate video where I just wanted to go through general trends for the year. So one of the sort of background influences that is going to be with us the entire year is Jupiter transiting through Pisces and then Jupiter going into Aries. So the specific timeline for that is that Jupiter has entered into Pisces on the December 29th of 2021. It will stay in Pisces through the 11th of May. From then it will go into Aries and will stay there until about the 28th of October. It will briefly regress back into Pisces from the end of October to the end of December, and from the 20th of December it will move back into Aries and will stay there in 2023. Let's see, so the main influence that we can expect with Jupiter in Pisces, and especially as it approaches conjunction with Neptune early in the early April, is that there will be some increased focus on things like or expansion of or increased news and increased inventory in the areas that are related to, of course, Pisces, and Pisces are ruled by Neptune, so it could be navy, beverages, of course, oil, shipping of oil, sort of pipelines, the traffic on the seas in general. So right now, for example, we have a congestion in many places of various ships near ports. So that, I believe, will continue increasing this kind of traffic again, and will peak around the end of March and early April. We may also expect through about, again, mid-May that there will be increased precipitation, so rains and floods, snowstorms, etc. may be worse than usual, with especially bad situations unfolding at the end of March throughout, say, early to mid-April, where Jupiter will conjunct Neptune at that time. And those are the type of snowstorms or floods that maybe are once in like 12-year kind of occurrence. So definitely worse than usual. Another thing we can expect from this Jupiter going through Pisces and again conjuncting with Neptune is sort of a dissolution of borders or limits and things spreading wider and further than expected, and things are related to, again, the areas of Jupiter and Neptune. So it could be, say, immigration across borders. It is easier because there are fewer constraints, and or something, like I said, flood spreads further than normally it would be expected, because something that is like a barrier that would normally prevent it to be there, like a dam, for example, is no longer there. Or there's just an overflow of perhaps like a pollutant of some sort, or a chemical, or an oil spill. We can unfortunately expect a large oil spill or spill of something that contaminates water especially, but really anything that's either is a liquid or a gas with Jupiter, and or pollution itself happens to be affecting water or liquid of some sort. So for example, right as Jupiter entered Pisces, there were news, at least in the US, about the raw sewage spilling in the LA, one of the LA counties, and basically beaches had to be closed. So unfortunately, with the Neptune conjuncting Jupiter in Pisces, these events may pick up and peak around end of March and early April. But again, anything to do with areas that have to do with, like, maybe dreamlike state, so maybe to do with like abuse of drugs, so transportation of drugs and chemicals, and distribution and sales of pharmaceuticals, again, chemicals, mind altering kind of substances, unfortunately or fortunately, I suppose, depending on what that substance is, like maybe it's a life-saving medication, can occur more easily at this time, because again, there are no borders, or not no borders, but rather the borders can be crossed more easily, or barriers. are not as high for maybe some drug to be approved, or the shipping of some medication can occur more easily. But then again, there's a risk of there being sort of too much of a good thing. Some rain is good, but then too much rain leads to floods and leads to soil contamination, because something that perhaps was buried deeply, maybe some sort of a decaying, I don't know, some recyclables, or perhaps some, too much fertilizer or something now be washed to the surface because of, again, excessive precipitation, and now it can contaminate the soil. So that's the danger with, I guess, there just being, again, too much of a good thing at some point. Maybe it's good that the ships are able to arrive, but then there might be just so much congestion that it will be hard to actually unload them. And there may also be some news about, again, religious kind of topics, because yet again there may be focus with both Jupiter and Neptune. The focus is there on spirituality, religion, morality, beliefs, values, and things like that. So we may hear about more kind of people either gathering together. It could be an online community where they're gathering and they're following some sort of belief, maybe like Christian belief, or it could be really anything that they see as their spiritually inspiring belief. So maybe they're gathering for meditation, or there could be some news about like a new church type organization, and especially again end of March, early April is when we may see increased news on that, about that. So maybe some large gathering, whether it's maybe in one of these metaverses. It could also be certainly just online communities that are, again, virtual and have to do with, again, imagination, fantasy, movies that may come out at this time, if they're indeed focused on things like, again, some fantasy world, like, I don't know, Avatar or something like that. Something that's like virtual reality, like Matrix, something to do with make-believe, again, maybe a fairy tale, by Disney or something like that. Those should be super successful. Similarly, if you're expecting or looking to start a business in those areas, and you just want to even just make it be an official start, even if you don't have any, product perhaps this time, those would be, early April or so would be a good time to just at least make that be like a first, sort of birth of the business, or introducing a new product in those areas, because that's the time when it will have an auspicious sort of signature, astrologically speaking, for expansion, for being popular again among people who value like visual arts. If you wanted to be an artist, or start, sell your art, or even visit an art gallery, or purchase a piece of art, or start, doing some photography, or vice versa, some, photographs. I'm thinking like maybe NFTs, anything to do with like some visual component to it, like video games, movies, like, Netflix, even movie theaters. Those areas may see sort of increased be featured more strongly in the news. There might be more investments in those areas. And again, it could be, of course, things may be repurposed to be more online because of COVID, which, speaking of that, of course, Neptune has to do with also like things like healthcare and infectious diseases. And at the same time, especially end of March and early April is when we may hear increased news about not necessarily COVID, but could be just other infectious diseases, which, of course, if you have flood and it's in a warm, hot area, which Jupiter has to do with like humid environments. So there could be other diseases multiplying due to flood, maybe like cholera or typhoid or something like that. So basically this is, again, not necessarily the best time for gathering in those kind of warm, hot, humid areas, because there might be some increase in various outbreaks. But again, certainly things can be done online. And again, there may be increased interest in participating in these kind of visual entertainment kind of based or religious, but also with the element of some visual and virtual element to them, activities. And any business that has to do with, like, again, Neptune and or Jupiter is likely to be seeing increased interest. So I mentioned it before, like yoga studios, or, I don't know, tarot readings, or really anything to do with, like, again, photography or art, even music. Neptune also has to do with music, so composing music, reviewing music pieces, writing songs, or a business that is focus on delivering, again, music or music-related products or beverages, especially alcohol, maybe again gaining in popularity. And of course, unfortunately, too much of a good thing. People may get lost in those areas. They may be losing, track of time. They're having a good time, and then they end up, consuming too much alcohol or whatever. And so that may also cause to increase news of people overdosing on something, or basically disconnecting from reality too much. Maybe they're lost in some metaverse video game or something. But basically, obviously anything can be used whichever way people choose to use it. But there's, with Jupiter, potential for that expansion to be sort of too much for some people. Let's see, and of course, profits for pharmaceutical companies, oil companies may really peak right around the time when Jupiter conjuncts Neptune, so right around, let's say, April, at which point there may be just too much inventory, so maybe too many, vaccines that are stored or something that maybe, for some reason, again, Jupiter has to do with heat, not heat, but hot, humid environments. If they're not properly stored, there may be a lot of waste, or there may be too many oil tanker ships just sitting there full of oil, but they can't offload their cargo, or some pipeline perhaps is blocked. And again, in one area, there's just some imbalance where in one area there may be a lot of, say, oil or gas or some chemical or pharmaceuticals may be stored, but in other areas there's not quite as much. But again, in one area things may be out of storage or overflow, or the inventory it just exceeds all the limits. And of course, at that point, the value of the related products and services may start going down, because again, everybody has just been doing the same, providing the same service, and it's just an overabundance of that inventory may cause prices basically at that point to regulate to down. Other news that we may expect is anything to do with marine life, fishing, ships, boats. Again, too many boats. Things may lead to some confusion or some naval activities. All of that may be expanding, and again peaking right around late March, early April, and then there'll be some follow-up activities at the end of October through late December to finish something up, maybe finalization of some project or some feedback on what was previously happening, maybe a project is now turned over to a new owner, or some sort of follow-up activities are still to come, and again sometime in November of this year. Also, the areas that may be again more in the news, as I mentioned, will be hot, sort of humid areas, and in particular those floods, etc., may specifically occur in the areas that are already either islands or coastal areas, and particularly Manila, Philippines seem to have a chart where those transits may affect it more than others, but I haven't looked at individual countries, country by country. Let's see. But basically, coastal areas, tropical island type areas may be affected the most. So anything that's under or near water, or a pipeline that is either oil pipeline or pipeline or cable or something that goes under the sea, submarines. Actually, people just swimming, kayaking, maybe a swimming school or something like that for for dogs. I don't know, but all of those businesses may again see an expansion, increased availability, or people will be turning more to those kind of types of entertainment or activities, even in sports, maybe some, fishing competitions, etc., may become quite popular through about May of this year. But again, as availability increases, too much inventory may cause prices then to go down. Then mid-May, Jupiter will switch and go into Aries, and at that point we may go from this excessive flooding, excessive precipitation, rains, into really hot but now dry time period. So then for the rest of the summer, there's actually increased probability of there being droughts this summer, so hot, dry kind of a climate areas, and hot, dry weather is what may be featured more into the summer. At the same time, we will also have Mars going into Aries, and so with Mars and Jupiter together in Aries, things that we may expect again: excessive heat, excessive drought, and also Jupiter has this is not affiliated, but is associated with things like religion, beliefs. So maybe like religious wars, or fighting about beliefs, whose belief is better, or who is the correct religious figure to follow. And again, just fighting in general. Also could be fighting over things like oil and gas, and fighting again in the areas that are hot, dry, like arid kind of areas, and also fighting over laws, over again, like I said, religion, over beliefs, what's the right thing to do, or attacks on or fires, or just kind of tensions, upsets involving law, religion, laws, lawsuits, actual like diplomats, ambassadors, professors, like any sort of judges, fighting about who should be the judge, who has the right moral sort of value to be the judge of something, or is this law the correct law, but because of the influence of Aries, and also with, again, for a period of time, Jupiter and Mars will be actually conjunct, what we may see is those disputes may escalate, or if there's a law passed at the time, there may be a lot of anger associated with, some part of the population may hate it, and there may be, again, like protests, and things may just get more heated than usual, like literally. At the same time, there may be emphasis on things moving faster. So the good news about Aries, it just likes things to go fast and doesn't really sit around and wait for things. So the improvement opportunities are there for passing more laws that maybe are effective and actually get things moving. And maybe also if there's a shipment that's stuck, like long distance transportation, or somebody's traveling and they're stuck, now things may move faster with both Aries and Mars kind of helping, so to speak. Jupiter, now things may move extra fast, the laws can be passed or resolved, or if there's a judgment pending, things now suddenly can become a lot become much more expedited. There may also be increased offerings of various like fast expedited programs for people to earn their degrees, so some expedited, master's degree program or whatever, and now suddenly things can go a lot again easier, not necessarily easier, but it may be much there might be opportunities for people to maybe, take a boot camp program or something like that, or it's the path to getting in higher education may become somehow easier. Similarly, it may be easier to travel, or the travel opportunities are such that people can get from place A to place B faster, and that's again Aries kind of expedites things. So shipping, long distance travel. Right around the starting second half of May, things will go from that clog and congestion peaking at the end of March and early April, to then starting second half of May, things may be moving a lot faster, and there just might be some logistic improvements. At the same time, with Mars and Aries influence, there might be attacks also on ships, or fires on the ships, or just some ships, trains, something that has to do with like accidents or attacks on, or fires that are related to the long distance transportation. And again, it could be just accidents due to excessive speed or excessive heat on, like I said, a fire. And again, continuing, like I said, fighting could be over various like legal challenges, and Aries and Mars are also related to sports. So there may be also some fights of legal nature involving athletes or sports teams or sports programs, maybe at colleges or individual athletes. If so, there may be an element of it being, again, related to higher education, or related to international, international sports program of some sort, or somebody, like with Djokovic, but it doesn't have to be him necessarily, just something to do with international, maybe body of some international body that supervises athletes or something like that. And there may be some, or international coach, or coach that's at a higher the institution of the higher education. And there may be some legal battle involving, again, athletics or athletes. Or there could be a famous athlete that also happens to be a judge or a lawyer. I'm not sure if that happens, but or we may hear that somebody who has been previously an athlete, that now they also are a judge or lawyer, or they become an ambassador, or somebody who's just changing, careers in such a manner. That's also possible. There may also be increased laws coming out that rule against sports, rule like military, police, and weapons. So maybe some reforms that affect those areas. That's also a possibility. International connections that are affecting various military campaigns, maybe like spread of some weapons, or spread of some military troops or even police that somehow have this international connection to it. So either maybe some international, exercises, or people traveling across borders that is related to some sort of military, practice, or even weapons sales. But all of that could be expedited and occur faster, and occur again with after some laws are passed. So some element of, again, there being some legal precedent for it, which again, there could be also lawsuits that are related to whether or not a particular weapon should or shouldn't be used, or whether some sale of weapons was or wasn't legal, or use of them, or who is allowed to travel to which country, again, for purposes of engaging in some warfare, for example. I don't know if there are such things, but basically the themes of legality and laws, and international laws, of course, being followed when it comes to the movement of military and or weapons sales or possession of weapons. All of those themes, again, will be in the news starting from about second half of May. Let's see, maybe increased some sort of military actions overseas. Like I said, expansion of the use of military and troops, but again, with the purpose of either international connection being there, like sending, international maybe aid to another country that consists of, say, military, or it could be that inviting maybe, again, troops from another country for exercise, sharing, knowledge, etc. Let's see, there may also be increased fighting over borders, again, international points of where you have immigration occurring, or people are crossing borders, with Mars and Aries influence. There may be things, maybe, again, related to especially hot areas that are hot and arid. So those countries or those areas, maybe like a desert type setting. At the same time, there may be some heated exchanges at the borders, or heated exchanges about, again, the like visas, or which goods should or shouldn't be shipped, like tariffs. Basically, some danger of attacks there is also increased during this particular transit of Jupiter going through Aries. But there also may be kind of more laws coming out about, again, regulating crossing of the border, regulating shipments of goods across the border. And there may also specifically focus on either, like, say, athletic equipment or equipment used by the military, or weapons. Let's see. There may also be, again, laws coming out that are signed like faster or processed faster. So if there's some agreements were pending and people can't reach an agreement, and they're arguing about basically what law should or shouldn't be passed, starting from second half of May, those laws actually may be passed a lot faster. And the talks, etc., can be done a lot more, again, faster, and this could be due to potentially some focus on some military threat, and therefore there's an emergency, and things just can and should and need to be done faster, and they happen to be done, and they're done a lot faster than when Jupiter was in Pisces. And let's see, and finally there may be, again, strong focus on like religion and values, and again in some connection to either sports, military, or like even video games that are involved, some sort of sports or military, but in the virtual world. So there may be some either fights or challenges. Maybe somebody who's like a video game maker over like, why do they have this uniform or something like that, or it could be along the lines of like the military personnel, they have certain beliefs and they're not being honored or something like that, and they sue somebody, or vice versa. Like there could be some problems about cultural issue where people are not respecting other people's cultural beliefs. And again, it may be related to like police or military or those kind of or even sports, where maybe somebody wants to wear a certain kind of clothing to participate in sports, and there is some lawsuit around that. So that is another potential manifestation. Let's see. So basically fighting over laws, fighting over beliefs, etc. And let's see. Oh yeah, and also one of the previous manifestations of when Jupiter conjoined Neptune, which is what we will see in the end of March and early April, was interesting one. I forget which year it was, but basically it may indeed be a situation that involves some sort of false alarm, where there's like an imaginary threat that doesn't actually materialize, like a delusional, I guess, thinking of some sort. Where one case there was really like, I think it was like in 1245 or something like that, back in the 13th century, where people were expecting super major flood. They were building almost like arcs, like in Bible, and because they were expecting like really major floods, but then like there were some rains and some floods, but nothing as crazy as that. But basically the panic was more than really the events that actually followed. And then in another time, I think there was like a signal on TV, and again, visual element is important, so it's signal that's somewhere where people can see it, that said about some incoming threat or something like an attack, and for 5:45 minutes there was this emergency signal on TV and people were panicking, but then it turned out to be just like a false alarm and it was just not the real actual alarm. So again, no need to panic, excuse me, especially end of March, early April, through about mid-April is when the situation may be such that there may be some things that people may be confused and not see whether something is or isn't true. Again, it could be that they're just playing too many video games and they get confused and lost in the metaverse. Or it could be that, again, there's just some malfunction, miscommunication, and things appear to be threatening and really they're not. So it's important to kind of check your facts, check your actual surroundings and not get caught into sort of things that appear to be either too good to be true, or vice versa, too scary. Perhaps the truth is somewhere in the middle, and it's okay to, take a step back and not get caught up in that. So the second influence that I wanted to cover has to do with nodes moving into, at least in Western astrology, they're moving from Sagittarius and Gemini into Scorpio and Taurus. And in fact, it is actually on the 18th of January that they're moving into those signs, and I'm actually recording this on the 18th, and it occurred to me that today we had this really major drop in the stock markets on the concerns about the rising yields, and indeed both Taurus and Scorpio is the pair that rules things like markets, banks, finance, investments, earnings. So indeed it's very, I think, telling. Maybe I should have paid attention to it more when I made my weekly predictions, where I thought that the market would go up today. But basically, indeed, starting from around the 18th of January, we will have for the entire year, more or less, I think, where we will have basically nodes going through the signs of Scorpio and Taurus. So the focus may be strong on those areas. There may be some, on the one hand, there may be some achievements made in those areas. So some transformation maybe of like related to banks, currencies, and even tax system. However, at the same time, there may be, again, too much sort of, I would say, greed or changes in values, where again, some people may be valuing some financial rewards so much that they will be more willing to engage in fraud, for example, like tax avoidance or something like that. But at the same time, there may be some innovations made in those areas where, again, can make things, again, more efficient, or kind of purge things if they weren't working correctly. And at the same time, there might be some specific transits when those nodes will touch important points in the charts of individual countries, and specifically one of them will be China later this year, is when there may be important developments for those countries where they will see even more dramatic changes that affect large groups of people. So especially for China, more or less the entire year, especially spring, I guess, starting in the spring, but especially summer and right around end of July into mid August is when we will have the nodes of the moon, as well as Uranus will be basically making difficult transits to the Venus in the chart of China. And so for that, what might be happening, I think there might be a lot of news coming out of there regarding debt, loans, potentially bankruptcies, rates, currencies, maybe some rules or some limitations placed on the use of cryptocurrencies, or news about using their own domestic cryptocurrency. But again, unfortunately, topics of debt and bankruptcy may definitely come out, and there may be quite a shakeup, especially right around late July and mid August, where we will also have Saturn forming a 3-degree within the 3-degree orb, a loose square to the nodes as well, and to Uranus as well. So definitely difficult time for some countries or some individuals. If it's in your chart, those nodes will be going over individual planets or important points like ascendant, for example. Definitely those folks will see some important developments in their lives where they somehow maybe find themselves in a public place, or what happens to them is because they're part of some group, for example, maybe they're in an airport and things just happen, maybe there's a major flight delay and they're together, or they're at the conference and there's some large announcements and they're part of the group, or they're the one actually who is making an announcement and therefore they're in front of the public and they're again in the public eye somehow. And so let's see, and definitely when nodes transit through certain signs, they make that transit corresponds to changes in those areas that affect large groups of people. And again, so for this year, we may expect either some news, unfortunately, about some financial turmoil out of China, and again, especially July, August. There may also be increased focus on currencies like Forex, but also crypto, especially with Uranus being in Taurus. And later, like I said, late July, early August, it will be conjunct the nodes, and there will also be Mars present there in Taurus. So basically, definitely some sudden value losses may occur, or some sudden bankruptcies, or some cancellation of some programs or projects. Maybe there's some sort of a bank or cryptocurrency exchange platform that suddenly changes its rules and regulations as to what they accept as a form of payment, or even they cease to exist, or there just are some service disruptions due to maybe, again, power outages, or just some hacking, or just some basically instability and problems in those areas. And again, there may be some sudden situations that may come up, again, not because of the nodes in the sign of necessarily of Scorpio and Taurus, but rather because, again, especially in July and August, the Mars will be conjuncting, I believe it was one of the nodes, North Node, and then also Saturn will be squaring the nodes. So definitely difficult times, and some sort of, again, purging of the maybe unstable financial institutions. Issues of loans, rates, and taxes will be affecting large groups of people. And again, just some volatility also for the currencies. And I would say it's overall for the year is not a beneficial time for cryptocurrencies, just again as a general trend, because of continuing, even though it's wider square between Uranus and Saturn, although it will become somewhat more exact in October, November of 2022. This ongoing general, even a wide square is still not beneficial for the
cryptocurrencies, especially for Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think it will still be
basically down pressure on those throughout the year, and especially peaking around July, August, and then November and November. Let's see. So basically in July and August, besides China, where there may be some cracking down on cryptocurrencies or sudden volatility, like some, again, unexpected surprising situations where, again, one day a bank maybe is promising, or bank or some institution that owes somebody money, they're promising to pay their bills, and the next day, creditors show up and literally the doors are closed. So something along the lines of something that's surprising, shocking, and not what's expected. At the same time, there may also be, I just looked, interestingly enough, the nodes, like I mentioned, in individuals' charts, they may have important impact on specific people if there's a exact transit to their, like a planet or some point on their chart. So again, I just did see that, I think in Putin's chart, those nodes will be affecting his like Jupiter. And so indeed, with like Uranus and Mars being there, especially again July, August, indeed, if you have also like the node Mars, node Mars and Uranus aspecting you Jupiter, which I believe in Putin's chart will be like by conjunction, such a person would feel subjectively an urge to like free themselves and or just kind of disregard rules, because again Jupiter has to do with like beliefs, morality, and also laws, and or in their own right they will feel that they're following what is the correct thing to do, again from their perspective, based on their beliefs, based on their religious or legal beliefs, or what they perceive to be a lawful thing to do. But with Uranus and Mars there, and the node, North Node, I believe, is not going to be a smooth kind of a discussion type of situation where a person kind of reflects on it and then they come to a conclusion. Rather, it's like this explosive, surprising, shocking revelation that they have, or they feel like they need to act urgently, and it may be like an eccentric or extravagant kind of a move that seems as kind of unpredictable but upsetting to other people. So basically that's interesting that it's occurring right again July, August, where I also see there being an impact to the chart of China, which may again have to do with like finance, rates, loans, debt. So something along the lines of there basically means some instability both globally and especially for systems that are related to banking and finance. And again, this may affect currency value, but I think it's for like cryptocurrencies, I think it will be more likely a loss or a drop. Let's see. At the same time, North Node in Taurus in general is actually overall an influence that would be supportive for banks seeking projects that may give them more earnings or improving stability, for areas like construction, maybe some new projects that are, construction, maybe farming, anything to do with like stable, slow growth. And generally, there may be increased focus on starting projects at this time. Basically, January onward, mid-January onward, where people may be looking to grow their money a little bit more slowly, but making sure that their assets are safe, or starting maybe a building project that again, it is combining, that is going to be beneficial over time, like a major building, maybe, I don't know, some sort of a infrastructure project where they're constructing something, but such a project may actually have a good chance of succeeding long term and be profitable again, as long as the focus is on kind of taking it slowly and making sure that things are safe and either assets are safe or things are done solidly. And if so, such projects again could be banking, could be investments, could be again construction, like maybe like a shopping mall or something like that, even though shopping malls may not be as popular this time, but something like maybe if somebody is in some country, they're looking to build again a big construction project that's actually going to be again profitable and stable, as long as again measures are taken to make sure that things are safe. The safety is actually an important element, an important focus, again, with nodes in Scorpio and Taurus, where if safety is ignored or things proceed too fast, there may be a really big sort of problems down the line where basically things eventually will come out and there will be either bankruptcy or some sort of big disaster leading to even deaths if again a construction is not done right and there's some safety problem there. So let's see. But yes, generally speaking, especially July, August, there may be some problems related to either banking area or finance or currencies and or taxes. And in those areas, there may be some shock waves, again, potentially out of having to do with China, but not necessarily. It could be just some general disasters or some problems, including bad weather like storms and lightning, tornadoes, basically some destructive activities, which could be just weather related, or it could be like a plane crash or crash where power is lost. And again, could be also related to airlines, airspace projects, electric vehicles, where there's this electric shock, a jolt of some sort, a fire that starts suddenly and it causes, unfortunately, like a wave that causes damage to large groups of people because of, again, there being nodes at the same time conjuncting Uranus especially, and with Saturn making square to the nodes. So it could be something like the wave of bankruptcies that follows these initial shocking events, again, possibly out of China, but it could be, again, the global thing as well. Maybe some related to like banks, but also real estate investments, farming, builders, fashion industry, sugar, precious stone, and jewelry. Those areas, if indeed there's this event where something is shocking or there's a problem or sudden loss of value, again, July and August are the times, but really the entire sort of year we may see focus on those areas where, again, there may be some problems in those areas where if things are not, again, done safely and carefully, there may be a sudden loss of values in those areas or sudden losses. Other areas that may also be kind of experiencing some increased, I guess, focus on them and potential for either increased earnings, but also major losses are like mortgage companies, insurance companies, even mutual funds, where, again, some group of people that are investing together or investors, especially if they're investing in like crypto, digital assets, or innovative high-tech sort of like, I don't know, electric vehicles, or like some high-tech equipment. Again, if things are not done carefully, maybe it's a wonderful new electric vehicle, but again, if there's some sort of safety mechanisms are ignored, or there's an airplane and again there it's not constructed with some safety feature basically not being addressed properly, there may be major losses to the point of like either company going under or deaths or just some major crashes. So again, safety definitely is quite important here as a topic. So if one is, say, investing in those areas, it's definitely important to assess the stability of, say, a bank, for example, or whether or not the, say, construction company is truly implementing the right safety protocols, for example. Let's see. So other areas that may also experience some shocking either value losses or some changes or some abrupt cancellation of their projects, or even sudden surprising beginning of new projects, new partnerships, etc., especially in July and August, would be, again, electric vehicles, power plants, like chip manufacturers, airlines, aircraft manufacturers, or any companies that may be like a wind turbine, I don't know, manufacturers, or companies that use those, anything to do with like maybe firefighting or winds and fire in general, IT, AI robotics, but again, would focus on something that's flying, maybe like drone, for example, or rocket. So those areas may see some major changes. Again, some, on the one hand, there may be some improvements and some new projects may be announced, maybe even unexpectedly. At the same time, there may also be unexpected sudden changes where those companies suddenly lose value, maybe like the order is canceled, something along the lines of like there being major safety issue and followed by an airplane crash, and therefore problems for that airline, and they're losing or aircraft manufacturer, they're losing orders, and they have problems, basically financial problems. But again, things may happen very suddenly, and again, it's important to basically pay attention to safety, and if that's taken care of, again, there's opportunity for growth and for things to be actually beneficial, especially in construction and even in investments. But again, it's better to go sort of slow and more secure in this case. Let's see. Lastly, with the nodes transiting through Scorpio and Taurus, there may be increased focus on individuals and leaders in those areas. So if when, nodes touch important points in the chart of such individuals, these individuals may find themselves being featured in the news, and if they're like a celebrity, with Taurus and Scorpio being the energy, it could be along the lines of them being maybe in financial either trouble or spending more money. Maybe they're buying some really crazy luxurious, like an island or something like that. Either they're spending a lot of money, they're losing a lot of money, or they're in trouble because of financial fraud of some sort, or hidden money is discovered, or they have done some hidden, secret investments, or some other secrets. Again, Scorpio has to do with secrets and kind of investigations, hacking, spying, kind of even illegal activities that are hidden. So there may be some news again about individuals, and one would have to look at their individual chart to see who potentially may be affected. And of course, I can't possibly look at every individual. Again, like one person that came up was Putin transit to his Jupiter, so maybe something along the lines of international relations, or some of his values, or something that he considers is a correct moral thing to do, maybe disregarding some laws. That's certainly one possibility, and that's again July, August. But there are so many other celebrities. But unfortunately, with Scorpio, one possibility is that there may be famous deaths announced. Again, if somebody's chart happens to experience this difficult transit from a node in like Scorpio, for example, or at least that they're going through some sort of change, maybe indeed some sort of transition where whoever they were before this, now they're like a different new person. So they haven't necessarily passed away, but maybe their status completely changed. Or again, if it's focuses more on Taurus, it may be having to do with their values. Maybe they, quit entertainment industry and they became like a monk or something like that. So just a different, again, like they're a different person, their values have changed, or maybe they lost all of their money, or they were caught basically doing some fraudulent financial deal, and therefore again, suddenly their status completely changed. So the transformation will have to do with either finance, values, but also status. And again, status could be as a voluntary change. The person just chooses to basically change who they are, or it could be that they're forced out, or even they pass away, unfortunately. So those are the type of news we may expect about like famous people, again, depending on where those nodes may fall in their chart and where they may transit. But basically the focus between these two signs, Scorpio and Taurus, has to do with like just kind of bringing to the attention of groups and public issues of like stability and safety and slow but steady but safe growth, and at the same time major transformations, letting go of basically this fixed identity or fixed way of doing things through maybe some transformation that may be somewhat more radical or difficult. But again, Uranus is there to make things, I guess, extra fast, so a person or a group of people may kind of not really even have much time to prepare for it. So maybe it might make things easier for some people because the change is so sudden. But basically, some situations may come up again just as a sort of a global public sort of a trend where some financial institutions may experience changes of people's finances or people's beliefs, may have like these really sudden drastic changes, and again due to perhaps them losing something, or they're seeing just as a public figure serving as like this I guess an icon, so to speak, of what to do or what not to do depending on what what they actually engage in. But those are like just the general themes that we may experience sort of globally. And at the same time, with Aries, Uranus in Taurus. Uranus also is a sign, rather planet of like innovative high-tech ideas. We may also have actually news continuing, I guess, coming out about continued focus on digital assets or value that is derived from like internet or the use of IT and high tech and airplanes and airspace development. So those areas will still continue to be overall seen as valuable, even though there may be some readjustments again, especially July and August. Still overall, those areas will be seen as valuable for investors and focus maybe on things that are like, how can we build things that are safe, but they can fly faster perhaps, or even process like financial deals faster, or send money faster, or make things kind of even more digital, less kind of attached to a particular like tangible assets. So maybe continuing still growth of like more cryptocurrencies, or some other ways of investing or exchanging value that is not necessarily tied to like any tangible assets, or even virtualizing things. And I'm not sure how that might relate to farming, but there may be some continuing focus on like either innovation in the farming industry, or using more technology, or like growing food in labs. Like that is also continuing kind of background trend for this year, as well as like improvement of like processing financial data, making things kind of again faster, and banking in a more digital kind of a way, or fewer locations that are physical locations, and kind of taking things more online and exchanging again goods even online without there being actual, I guess, good for people to actually hold in their hand. So those are still will continue to be important kind of topics throughout the year. Let's see. Also some changes, again, some surprising changes that are related to currencies in general, forex and or cryptocurrencies. Also some expedited processing of like taxes, maybe some changes in the tax system. And again, this could be a global situation where how insurance or taxes are processed may become kind of more revolutionized, where things may now be processed faster, with kind of, again, more focus on using some sort of more innovative approaches to both gather and process the data. And again, unfortunately, like this March and April, we may see potentially either floods, and then in the July and August, there may be potentially additional disasters that have to do with like fires, or maybe some crashes, like an airplane crash, or just some even earthquakes. And so indeed, I think if insurance companies may have more data indeed to process, and they may just need to come up with some innovative ways of basically processing that volume of data. So I guess that's the beneficial influence from both the nodes going into like Taurus and Scorpio, and Uranus being there as well in Taurus, where again some innovations may come out to help these industries to process again large volumes of data faster, and address like insurance claims faster, or make it easier for people to basically deposit and withdraw money. But again, the focus may be shifting from like actual tangible assets to kind of how can we make it easier for people to pay with something that's not I guess tangible, like coin or something like that, but as some virtual digital asset. So now on the topic number 3, and that's COVID. Basically, there's some interest, I'm sure, like because it's an ongoing situation with virus, etc. Like things are transforming. What is it that's mutating, etc. And so basically, just something to comment on. It's not necessarily a new development this year. The only thing that we have this year that's a little bit different is that, again, with Jupiter in Pisces, there might be increased focus on healthcare and infectious diseases in general. And when Jupiter will conjunct Neptune, so especially end of March and early April is when we may expect increased focus on infectious diseases in general. It doesn't have to be COVID, but if indeed COVID is still around, there may be another peak of interest about basically medicinal, approaches or pharmaceuticals or vaccines or anything that's basically involved in treating it or preventing it, etc. So this is the time where, again, just any healthcare or pharmaceutical related topics will be kind of popular in the news. And then specifically for COVID, it's important to know that when it had first become, I guess, in a thing that it came out in the news and people started to basically worry about it. So late, I guess, 2019, early 2020, if I'm not mistaken, that's when basically we had Pluto-Saturn conjunction as a transit, and it had also passed over, I believe, Jupiter and the 12th house in China, which has to do with, again, things like indeed medical, like labs or secretive places. And again, doesn't mean that, or hospitals or places where, like prisons, monasteries, etc. So it doesn't necessarily mean that things came out of China. I'm not implying any such thing. Again, this is not up to me to decide, but more that those areas would be in the news. That it's interesting that Pluto and Saturn conjunction also happened to be triggering Jupiter in the chart of China, and that was the initial, certainly, area from where, I guess, it had spread from whatever its origin. And because of the Pluto and Saturn being a really slow-moving, I guess, cycle, or both planets rather take a long time to orbit Earth, the cycle of transits between them is fairly, it takes a long time. So until this cycle basically completes, which will be another Pluto-Saturn conjunction in 2053, this sort of whatever the situation that was put in motion at the time when we have heard about COVID first, in like I think January of 2020 is when Pluto and Saturn were conjunct, is when this current cycle will actually end. And of course throughout the key transits, so Pluto squaring Saturn and Pluto opposing Saturn and Pluto squaring Saturn again on its way towards conjuncting, again, that's when we may have some pivotal moments that maybe some sort of follow-up points, so to speak, check-ins or more critical developments. And so the next that are related to whatever the initial cycle that started in January 2020. So the first such time period will be when Pluto and Saturn will form a square, and that will be in June of 2028. So still quite a bit of time from now, but still something to keep in mind. And by the way, previously, some of the previous transits between Pluto and Saturn, of course, coincided with really important transformations that are like geopolitical significance, and also having to do with maybe even like diseases that have to do with like compromised immune system. So specifically, one was in 1983. Of course, there was a HIV was sort of not featured, but HIV, I guess, epidemic was either peaking or first started. I can't recall at this point, but 1947 was, of course, this divide between India and Pakistan, of course. Then in 1947, there was a smallpox outbreak in New York City, where they had to vaccinate pretty much everybody, but they were able to stop successfully the smallpox at that time. So similar sort of themes of there being a large group of people that are affected. Many people unfortunately die also. And there being like this big turbulation where people have to move, or they're afraid, or there's some problems basically that are afraid for their health. But again, in some cases, things were treated successfully. Like I said, in 1947, the smallpox outbreak in NYC, they quickly had like big lines, and people had received their vaccines quickly, and they basically avoided a really like spread of that. So obviously now there's this big spread of, I guess, vaccinations across the globe. And 1983 there was also another, of course, AIDS or HIV pandemic. And again, the focus there was also on similar topics, which is basically problems with the immune system and people being affected, and there being concerns about there not being a proper, I guess, treatment for them. And there, of course, associated research, and obviously people still have that condition, so it's not like it was completely eliminated, just like COVID may never be completely eliminated. And again, I'm going to leave it to doctors who know more about it. But just speaking of the cycles, something that begins at the cycle of Pluto and Saturn conjunction will not be necessarily easily go away the next year, but rather it's going to see maybe some transformations at the key points, which again, next point will be June of 2028, when Pluto and Saturn will square each other. Then in July of 2036, Pluto and Saturn will oppose. So there may be another sort of follow-up point, perhaps some sort of new information or new maybe scientific developments or new research coming up to, again, as a follow-up to the cycle that started of January rather 2020. And then another square between Pluto and Saturn is going to occur in October, November of 2044. And then finally, a new event or new situation, a new cycle will begin in sometime June of 2053, where interestingly also Uranus will enter Libra. So a different sort of, again, pivotal change where maybe the focus will shift to a different area completely, which of course with Libra there being maybe some change in relationship, like how people relate, and who, can be in partnership with whom, and that's whole different, what is it, a different, I guess, qualitatively different situation. But basically what I'm trying to say is that until like 2028, we will be in this continuing sort of path where there may not be major changes, but there may be things that will come up in 2028 that will be relevant to the cycle that started in 2020. So maybe some adjustments, if there's some maybe breakthrough scientific advances or a new decisions about like regulations, who should be in charge of which maybe regulations, or perhaps basically there may be even some protests against whatever the current conditions, or there may be basically offers of changes that are structural changes that maybe address things somehow radically, maybe like a new drug of some sort, or again a new innovation based on some scientific research that offers a completely new different way of looking at things. But basically that may not be happening until again about 2028. So it's not that nothing will be happening. Obviously there may be some ongoing developments, but there may not be a radical like change in circumstances where things are approached from a completely dramatically different perspective until about June of 2028. Then of course this is not the only, the like Pluto and Saturn transits are not the only transit that coincide with like focus on healthcare and epidemics, etc., or scientific developments that are related to healthcare. Also, of course, in the more near future, in 2025, and maybe starting as early as second half of 24 and into 26, but especially 2025 is when we will have Saturn and Neptune conjunction, and that is something that previously occurred, for example, in 1918 when we had a Spanish flu epidemic as well. So Neptune, of course, has to do with things like healthcare, and Saturn also brings often losses, constrictions, or some regulations, which again often are not necessarily negative, but rather they're necessary to just address things because things need to be organized. Like if you need to organize a group of people to like vaccinate everybody or to make sure people don't do something stupid, you need to have some somebody in charge to do that, basically. So obviously, if they abuse their power, that's a whole different story. But basically, in 2025 is another time period where there might be another concern or may come up about another sort of pandemic that may be also of like some sort of flu type disease, because again, previously that's what that transit between Saturn and Neptune had corresponded to. And there may be some, again, emphasis on some responsibility of either large corporations or maybe like pharmaceutical companies coming up with some solutions or doing something, because of course Neptune has to do with pharmaceuticals. But they're definitely focused on some either innovation in healthcare, maybe ability with both of those planets at this time at 2025 going into Aries, maybe coming up with new approach to maybe develop vaccines faster, or coming up with diagnosis faster, or coming up with some new treatments, again, much faster. And there being some new structure that is based on, again, either chemical, pharmaceutical innovations or offerings. So, for example, definitely with two planets conjunct, Saturn and Neptune, there may be focus on kind of a joining of the powers, or joining of the influence, or joining of the, I guess, shared responsibility between pharmaceutical companies or like hospitals or healthcare providers and not corporations, but rather governmental entities. So definitely government may be a lot more involved in perhaps controlling how pharmaceutical companies do their business, or taking over management of, say, healthcare facilities, even to a larger extent that it's happening right now. So definitely kind of a government and pharmaceutical companies, or chemical companies, or companies that basically have to do with like biomedical research, or again, healthcare providers. They will be collaborating a lot more closely with kind of more with entities, most likely governments, but it could be any entity that provides organization and structure. Perhaps there will be kind of much more organized, but also faster, because of these planets being in Aries in 2025, much faster approach to solving problems is maybe there's something that's mutating. The solutions may be offered a lot faster. So, for example, previously when these two planets, Saturn and Neptune, were conjunct, there was I think it was like civil war in the United States or something like that, or some sort of war. Let's see. And basically what was happening is that they had a lot of soldiers that were on the battlefield, and they needed to do operations like, like cut off somebody's leg or something like that. And they needed anesthesia, of course, because they were suffering. So at that time, even though it was unfortunate circumstances where people were suffering and a lot of people were wounded, but at the same time, there were major advancements in healthcare, specifically in how to treat these wounds, how to perform surgeries quickly and efficiently so people wouldn't die, and also how to basically developments in innovations in the administration of anesthesia. So again, this basically in 2025, again as early as 24, like second half of the year, we may hear about some innovations, scientific innovations, and perhaps it could be because the government steps in and kind of structures the treatment, or makes companies more responsible for how they do business. And basically things can then be much more proceed a lot faster, with both of Saturn and Neptune entering at the same time into Aries. So at this time we may see actually improvement in how people are treated, because they may be treated now faster, and there might be a lot more controls over basically how things are happening. And again, this control and structure doesn't have to be negative. It could be something that allows things actually to proceed faster, because things are now following certain routine. And there's some oversight, and again, new options to treat people may come up faster, but it may be either in response to the current epidemic of, say, COVID or any other, I guess, flu or whatever. but it could also be something that's new, that comes out right around the end of 24, 25, and therefore some new structures are implemented, or some new facilities or research is put in place to quickly address that. But whether it's going to address a current pandemic or it's going to address something that may come out in a few years, certainly 2025 looks like a year of major changes, innovations in healthcare, but also pharmaceuticals, and basically research into effects of various like chemicals, medications, etc. Of course, Aries is also a sign of ruled by Mars, so it also, there may be increased focus on like warfare, biowarfare, or bio weapons at the same time, and that obviously, again, that's, you can use innovations for good or for bad. That's more like an ethical dilemma at this point. What's interesting is that previously, another time in the more recent past where Saturn and Neptune were conjunct was in 1953. So there may be also, and again, I just was entering things into basically Google to see what happened in 1953. And apparently in the US there was this incl or something. I'm not sure if it was research, but basically, apparently they were giving some drugs to people to see how their minds would respond to them. And so, of course, that's interesting because this has to do with like government, again, being present and using, drugs, of course, Neptune for like research. And with, again, in 2025, when we will have Aries is where those two planets together will be entering. And Aries, in terms of like the medical astrology, the body, it rules head, brain, face. So again, it doesn't have to be anything, again, negative. That's, of course, anything can be used for good or for bad. But the innovations and research that can be accomplished may specifically focus on like face, like nose, eyes, ears, brain. So again, it could be due to people suffering perhaps something, maybe like a flu. Obviously, you may have some, drippy nose or whatever, or those infections may be in your nose, or viruses may be in your nose, and therefore maybe that's the place where those the research may be focused on. Or it could be just generally speaking innovations that help people maybe improve maybe their mental functions, for example. So again, anything can be used for good or for bad, but the area of focus, just generally speaking, that's where maybe the next kind of big developments, but we may expect some major innovations or some major research is 2025. And this year, again, March and April is when we may expect, whether it's COVID or some other infection, potentially it could be, again, cholera somewhere because of floods, is when we may expect some increased focus on things like travel-related issues or travel-related regulations because of some concerns about something spreading, some sort of disease or some sort of outbreak. Let's see, and then finally, I just wanted to quickly touch, and really it deserves its own video, but just to, since it's a significant transit to the US chart, US this year and into, let's say, February even 2024, but certainly this year is going to be an important year for the US in terms of it experiencing a Pluto return, where basically Pluto transits about 270 years or so, and now it's going back to its original position in the chart of the US as it was first founded. And basically what Pluto symbolizes, and again, as you can imagine, with it moving slowly, things are not happening overnight. It's more like a transition from sort of one qualitative state to another. But again, it's a slow transition, which again, this year will be significant, but it will continue happening through, like, I'd say, February of 2024. But with Pluto being in Capricorn and in the second house of finance, yet again, this theme of finance is going to be quite significant, both globally with nodes being there, but also with Pluto, again, for the US in the second chart of second house of in its chart is going to be putting enormous sort of pressure on changes in financial system. So it could be related to like value of currency, addressing situation with like debt, changes in the rates indeed. And especially like around March 2nd, we will have Mars, Venus, and Pluto conjuncting US, Pluto in this original chart. So definitely I would say early March, I know there's going to be like a Fed meeting, I think the 15th, 16th of March, but somehow March 2nd, and I think I'm not sure if it's new moon or something like that, I can't remember. But basically 2nd of March somehow seems to be one of the more critical periods for for the US, where there may be some news about either some financial changes, or could be like tax reform, or something to do with insurance companies, but some major announcements that affect financial system, new policies, again, policies, reforms, and unfortunately, again, obviously people may be concerned about because things may be somewhat dramatic, like if there's if indeed Fed is going to be, or whoever is going to be raising the rates at this time, things indeed may be a lot more aggressive than even maybe speculated because of presence of Mars. Mars definitely pushes things kind of to be, faster, more, more aggressive, etc. So indeed, if there are regulations or the rates are to increase, I think indeed things definitely will be, the expectations of the basically hawkish Fed is definitely justified. In fact, things may be even more kind of radical than expected. At the same time, second house more generally has to do with like people's values. What do they see as valuable? And Capricorn is a very sign that has to do with like corporations, government, structures, limitations, etc. So to what degree people perceive certain like governmental leaders or governmental structures or even large established corporations as valuable. So some of them may increase in value a lot more, some of them may fall in value, but whatever the change may be, it may be more dramatic than, again, as expected, because Pluto, again, is a planet that has to do with like fairly radical transformations. So people, if they like throw somebody, under the bus, they will really like be against them, and it will kind of gang up on them, again, in the metaphorically speaking, and or vice versa, they can pick somebody and just kind of carry that person from like kind of anonymity to become some important politician, for example. But the change in that person's status or in the company's status, of maybe one company had virtually no value, like some small bank or something like that, suddenly they may become really popular again because of people's values. For some reason, they decide to give them a lot of value. And so there are a lot of this possibility of companies really rising, or politicians, or like governmental entities, maybe like some sort of a department of something, or a group that again had enjoyed some sort of a really secure political, I guess, capital, so to speak, or were seen as valuable, suddenly they lose value. So there's definitely some changes in the value, not just in financial sense, which again may definitely happen, where again there might be fluctuations in the value of USD, changes in the cryptocurrency value, again more dramatic and potentially down again, I think, for this year. But more so for the US as a country, just changes in basically, or reevaluation. Do we still think that this is valuable? And if we do, then that's fine, and then people will wholeheartedly embrace it. But if something is deemed to be not valuable, it will be completely thrown away. It will not be even like, oh, let's keep half of it, or let's keep 30% of it. It will just be completely discarded. So it's like going like through the spring cleaning, so to speak, where people just kind of throw old things away. That could be old ways of governing, who rules over what. So maybe should banks within certain areas have certain say about certain, I guess, rules, or should it be a one centralized entity that presides over this group of bank that makes those decisions? So things of that nature. It will be definitely focused on finance to a large degree, but also things like taxes, rates, and again, it could be both changes in actual, like say, rates, for example, but it could also be changes through switch of who is responsible for, say, collecting taxes, who is responsible for deciding who can claim, which insurance claim. So something along the lines of even policies that rule insurers, policies that rule, individual smaller banks that are under some larger bank, for example. And as I said, March 1st and 2nd may see particularly important announcements from the US. Again, could be like major financial reforms, and those may pass after some heated discussion, so I don't think those will pass on like very easily, but it may give more power to some entity and take away kind of power from some other entities, as I just mentioned. So it could be like consolidation of power into, you know, maybe one entity's hands, or it could be, I think consolidation is more likely, but it could also be taking away power from some entities that previously enjoyed it. So some changes in, again, the value, but changes also in who should control and decide what is or isn't valuable, or how maybe taxes should be paid, what basically are the proper like tax credits that people can claim. And previously, of course, this is the first Pluto return that US is experiencing, but previously under like other transits to that point of the chart where Pluto's sitting in the US chart, what we've seen is some other kind of reforms that also had to do with taxation in particular, and it could have been something to do with like centralizing the control in the hands of one like entity, like a bank or financial institutions, but also having to do with changing basically who can claim credits for like investing in, say, real estate, or basically changing what deductions maybe an investor can make by improving maybe their like place that they're renting to somebody else. And unfortunately, in the past, those couple cases that I've seen were actually not helpful, but rather they were seen as basically having a negative effect on buying the property for the first time. Like basically they were not good for the first-time home buyers, and also not good for people who are like investing in the real estate for the purposes of renting it to others. So basically what happened, and especially with the US also experiencing this year, Neptune entering into its fourth house of having to do again with banks, real estate, but also farming, what we may see is that if indeed, especially I think March is when it may occur, especially early March, is when there may be some financial reforms passed, and may have to do with like taxes, some tax reform, for example, where it may be that there may be initially a rush to like buy property because of, again, concerns about the rising rates, but also about taxes, not just rates. And then after that, starting again sometime this summer, is when there may be actually a drop in the real estate purchases, and in fact excessive accumulation of inventory, which of course then subsequently may, at least for the second half of the year, may lead to real estate prices going down. So definitely some important like resets, changes in the power, and again having to do more with financial power, but also with what is or isn't valuable. And again with Neptune entering US's fourth house of, again, bank assets, real estate, there may be some also changes and confusion about basically due to maybe some reforms, like who is responsible for what area may see, you know, real estate going up. Certain things may just be unclear, and again there may also be situations where there may be even changes in like borders, not necessarily borders, but like redrawing of some borders, like which district, which streets, I don't know, which cities fall into this district or some other kind of district, and therefore like which entity now supervises, like maybe governmental entity, or which entity gets to collect taxes from which area. Those things may be changing again. So it has to do with like basically changing sort of power, changing controls, changing of course also responsibility, like which entity now, you know, is responsible for, I don't know, cleaning, you know, streets or picking up trash in this particular area. So basically this municipal kind of a sense to it, basically who governs which area, which banks report to which other, you know, banks above them, who gets to collect taxes and which kind of taxes do people pay. So all of those things may undergo some major changes, as well as the USD value, rates, and entities that are involved in the entire sort of process of like processing money, saving money, collecting money, real estate company, insurance companies. All of that may see some major reforms, changes, and it may lead to initially to, again, people rushing to buy more houses, perhaps more real estate investments. But then I think second half of the year, things may cool off due to the oversupply of the inventory. And I think it may actually affect negatively real estate prices, at least in sort of a relatively short term. So those are just the four main sort of topics that I wanted to touch on. And ideally, I'd like to make also some specific videos on like US and perhaps China or any other countries, but that would require additional research. So separately, I'm going to post a video on the individual months of the year where I will go through like individual months and what specific days of each month may be significant and why. And so look for that. I will add that in the description for this video. Until then, have a fantastic 2022 and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.